Hello everyone, this is chapter 1. This is an introduction to biology. So we'll get into very basic concepts today, and it's important to note that this is going to be an intro. It's not going to be comprehensive. We're going to go into detail more on all of this throughout the semester. This is just a very brief overview. So, biology, what is it? It is the study of life. This is an ongoing inquiry about the nature of life. So biology encompasses a wide scale of sizes. We can talk about single-celled organisms up to whales and giraffes. It covers a huge variety of life, so we can talk about fossils and present-day organisms. Biology studies many different levels, so like I said, we can talk about single-celled as opposed to the entire planet. So how do we think about all of this information at once? We have 5 underlying themes in biology. We have organization, information, energy and matter, interactions, and evolution. So talking about organization, we have this hierarchy that we talk about, starting from largest to smallest. We'll go into depth about each individual one. So our largest one is the biosphere. So that's talking about all life on Earth. So it is the Earth. Everything living on the Earth is the biosphere. Then we have ecosystems. So it's all the living and non-living things, but in a particular area. So like the tropical rainforest, a desert. We live in the temperate deciduous forest, so anything like that, that's considered an ecosystem. Communities, that is a particular spot in that in that ecosystem. So it's all the organisms in one small spot. So the plants, the animals, fungus, mushrooms, such forth. So all of these organisms belong to a species. Now, when we're talking about a population, that's looking at all the individuals of a single species living in the area. So all the population of deer in an area, all the population of humans in an area, that is a scientific population. And then you have an organism, so that's a living individual thing. You are an organism, a plant, a deer, all are organisms. Then organisms are made of organs. So a body part that is made of multiple tissues and that have a specific function. So the leaves on a plant or your stomach is considered an organ. Then we have tissue. So that's a group of cells that are working together and they form an organ. So this is a honeycomb. This is where photosynthesis happens. So you also have your epidermis, and that's what we call the skin. You have cells. Those are the fundamental unit of life. Some organisms are only one cell, like bacteria, protists, anything like that. And then we have organelles. Those are all the things that are inside of the cell. So you can see here that we have chloroplast, and that's what helps the plant photosynthesize. Then we have molecules, so your atoms. This is the chlorophyll molecule right here. They are normally green, and this is what absorbs the sun. In this slide, we'll be watching an Amoeba Sisters video breaking down the levels of organization. Throughout the semester, we will see the Amoeba Sisters quite a bit. They are biology teachers that help break down certain concepts. I'll also have them in the additional resources under Blackboard. So you can go and check out their videos. But here we go.
If I asked you to describe the biological levels of organization, could you do it? What would those levels be? Actually, what would be the point about caring about them in the first place? Well, biological systems are composed of many levels, and we care about them because when these levels are analyzed, it's possible to relate the levels not only to each other, but the whole system. All of our videos tend to focus on one or more of these levels, which is why we have chosen to make this video come first in our biology playlist. The first level that we are going to start with is the most basic living level that makes up all of life. It is the cell. Now, can something be smaller than a cell? Sure. For the cells that contain organelles, the organelles are obviously smaller than the cell they are contained in. Biomolecules are smaller than cells. We learn about biomolecules as they are major non-living components within cells. Atoms are smaller than a cell. You can even get smaller than atoms when considering subatomic particles. But for this video, we are going to start at the cellular level, a basic living unit. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about bacteria, archaea, fungi, protists, plants, or animals. If you're talking about something alive, you're talking about something made up of one or more cells. Now, when you have a lot of cells that are working together for a combined function, you end up with the next level, tissues. An example of tissue includes cardiac muscle tissue, which would be made up of many cardiac muscle cells. Tissues make up organs, which is our third level. You have a lot of organs in your body. An example of an organ would include your heart. When you have multiple organs working together, you end up with the next level, an organ system. Consider the digestive system. It includes your stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, liver, etc. These particular organs work together to help you digest your food and to use the food for energy that you need for all kinds of cell processes. The digestive system is just one example of an organ system. But tie in all of the organ systems and what do you get? An individual, an organism, like you, or this platypus. He's got organ systems too. Now, if you have a lot of platypus together, what's the plural of platypus? According to dictionary.com, you can say platypi, which sounds especially fancy. And you have a population. This population of platypi can breed with each other. And they're all the same species. It's a platypi population. Great YouTube channel name right there. But include other populations such as fish, algae, and plants along with the platypi, and now you have a community. A community includes many populations, but it does not include abiotic factors. Abiotic factors are factors that are non-living, like rocks. Abiotic factors are not considered in the community level, just biotic factors. Biotic factors, on the other hand, are living. When abiotic factors are considered, such as the rocks, the temperature of this environment, the water, and the biotic factors, such as all the organisms we mentioned before, we now have an ecosystem. Well, it turns out that many ecosystems can be found in different regions on the globe. If talking about this collectively, you are at the level of biome. An example is a desert biome or a rainforest biome. You will find desert ecosystems or rainforest ecosystems in multiple places on the globe. But when talking about a desert biome or a rainforest biome, you are considering all of these ecosystems. Now, what happens when you put all the biomes together? Well, now you are talking about the level of the biosphere. The biosphere includes anywhere on our planet where life is supported. It is the sum of all of the biomes, all the areas where organisms live. Well, we're finished with our tour of the biological levels of organization, but remember, this is just an overview. The more biology you learn, the more you will discover how these levels relate to each other, and the whole system. That's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Alright, I hope that broke it down a little bit more for you guys. You were able to understand it a little bit better. Like I said, we'll use the Amoeba Sisters quite a bit in this class. I know it's a little bit childish and kiddyish, but I feel like they break the concepts down really well. So we'll be using them quite a bit. No. There we go. We're going to skip that. So back to our unifying themes that we talked about earlier. We've already gone through organization, and now we move on to information. And when we talk about cells, that information comes through genetic material, whether it be DNA or RNA. In the cell, that that genetic material is stored in the nucleus. So DNA is this genetic material, and DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and we'll get more into that. So your DNA is very long, and it can be thought as books with chapters in it. And each chapter is an instructional manual, and it tells other things what to do. So it makes proteins to help the cell do what it needs to do, and these things are called genes. All of your genes together are what we call a genome, and that's your whole library of your genetic information. So adding in another unifying theme, we have energy and matter. So everything that's living requires energy. We need it to be able to move around, to grow, reproduce. And we get energy by breaking molecules apart, more specifically ATP and NADPH. But we'll get more into that in later chapters. So there's two divisions of organisms based on how they get energy. We have producers, which produce energy from the sunlight. So we have this bamboo here. Or we have consumers. So those actually eat other organisms for energy, like this panda. Another unifying theme are interactions. So nothing happens in isolation. You are always around something else that is living. So we must think about how we interact with each other on this planet. So you can see in this picture, we got the leaves absorbing the sunlight, the leaves fall, and those minerals go into the soil. And then the animals eat the leaves, they get fruits, leaves, and their waste then returns into the soil. It's a ever-going cycle of how everything interacts with each other. So interactions happen even with the smallest things to the largest things. So molecules and cells interact with one another, organisms interact with one another, and we also interact with the environment. And the last unifying theme is evolution. So evolution is simply the concept that organisms living today are modified descendants of their ancestors. So that's just saying we all descended from something and we changed a little bit. So organisms adapt because they need to compete with everything else. So this is what we call survival of the fittest. You may be used to that terminology. So we all compete for our resources, and those that can't compete as well as others tend to die off and go extinct. So summary of those 5 themes that we talked about. So we have organization, talking about we go from big to the biosphere down to the single-celled organisms. Cells have to pass on the genetic material. Living organisms have to be able to use energy to stay alive. Interactions are important. We don't live in isolation, and neither do our cells. And evolution is how we got here, through adaptation, complexity, diversity, and all of that. So now getting into evolution and the diversity of life. So biologists have identified about 1.8 million species of organisms. We have to be able to organize and distinguish each species. So we have 3 large domains. Those are bacteria, archaebacteria, and eukarya. So bacteria do not have a nucleus, and they live in normal conditions. Archaea are cells that do not have a nucleus, but they live in extreme conditions, and we'll get more into that later on as well. And eukarya, those are cells that have a nucleus, and that's where we're located. Most organisms that you think of that aren't bacteria are in eukarya. So biologists have identified about 1.8 different species, like I said. So biologists organize all these organisms within this domain all the way down to a genus and species name. So we start with domain. We have domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. What I was taught was dumb kids playing catch on freeways get smashed. That's a good way to remember the mnemonic for the levels of organization when it comes to classifying organisms. So each species of organism has a two-part name. First, it's the genus name, and then it's the species. This is what we call the specific epithet. So with a red fox, this Vulpes vulpes, this is the specific epithet. It has the genus name, and it has the species name as well. And there's a cute little picture of a red fox. Humans are named for the genus Homo and the species Sapien, so that is our specific epithet. And there we go. Dogs are Canis familiaris. Got a cute little dog there. And then wolves are Canis lupus. So as you can see, our genus name is the same for both dogs and wolves. They're in the same genus, but they're different species, so they have a different specific epithet or scientific name, if you want to use that term. Those species within the same genus, that first name, are more closely related than those that are in different ones. So wolves are more closely related to dogs than they are to humans because they share that genus name. And each breed of dog is considered a subspecies. So all dogs are Canis familiaris, and it's a subspecies, whether it's a pug or a Great Dane. Those are called subspecies. So getting into science and inquiry, the heart of science is inquiry. So we're searching for explanations to the natural world around us. Humans are naturally curious, and we have been observing the world since humans first existed. So scientists have a general process in order to form and answer questions as we gather data. And this quote right here is from a guy who works on Mythbusters, and it's the only difference between screwing down and science is writing it down. So we're just trying to find out answers to the world around us. So here are the steps to the scientific method. At first, you have observation. You just notice something's happening around you. And then you question it. Why is that happening? You make a hypothesis, which we all know is an educated guess. You make a prediction on what's going to happen. And then we do an experiment to see what's going to happen. And you can always revise those 3 steps and repeat them if necessary. It's very important to note that revising your hypothesis isn't a bad thing. It's great to get things right, but it doesn't always have to be right on the first chance. One good example of that is what we're going through right now with COVID-19. So when COVID first started, even getting things delivered, they were like, you should spray everything down with Lysol because we weren't sure how it was transmitted. Well, through scientific method and experimentation, we found out that it's not passed and it can't live on things. It's passed through the air. And then we get to the mask and people are like, oh, you have to have an N95 mask or cloth masks are fine. And we go back and forth all the time. This is all a part of the scientific method. This is all a part of science. So it's okay that we revise things over time. It doesn't mean that things are bad. So how could we figure out if a mask can reduce viral transmission? So we made an observation: covering your face blocks spit. We ask questions, you form a hypothesis. If a mask can block spit, then it may be able to block viral particles. You predict what would happen. So I predict that a mask can reduce the number of viral particles that enter the air while talking or breathing. You do an experiment, design an experiment where someone talks while wearing a mask and not wearing a mask, and you see how those particles travel, and you revise and repeat. What if this experiment doesn't tell you anything? What if you're now interested in looking at how different masks will block the spread? So that's all a part of the scientific method. So important things to remember when designing an experiment. You need to make sure that you gather enough data. You don't just want to look at 2 different people and say, oh, this is how it's going to work every single time. No, you need lots of data. You also need to reduce variables. Don't try to test everything at once. Like with the mask thing, we don't want to test if it's going to transmit people wearing a mask versus not wearing a mask, plus wearing different types of masks all at the same time. That's a lot of variables going on. And don't be afraid to be wrong. Science is about the truth. It's not always about being right. We're just trying to figure out what is and what is right. And we don't always have to do that the first time. So scientists try to build on each other's work by reproducing data to confirm its validity, forming new hypotheses based on existing data. So you look at what's already been put out and you form your hypothesis based on that, or performing experiments to test those hypotheses. So it turns out someone did that experiment that we were just talking about a second ago, and experiments are published in journals so that others can build on them and confirm their results. So if you look at this, it's talking about face mask. So you can see that if you double layer up a tea towel, it actually works as a pretty good face mask. And you can see that it's got the results down there. So scientists communicate results through peer review process where other scientists validate and evaluate the study. So it goes through several people in the field before it ever comes out that this is true, or before the article is ever posted. So science is structured to build on the work of others that came before us. And that's actually all I have today. Make sure that you do your Chapter 1 quiz. You don't have any homework this week, but you do just have that Chapter 1 quiz. It'll be about 10 questions out of a bank. I think there's like 47 questions in the bank, but you only have 10 questions that you're going to answer. Make sure you sign up for Pearson. Take that syllabus quiz, and I will see you next week when we talk about biology and evolution. Have a good week. Bye.